Since March 2020, like so many people, my wife Stephanie and I have spent our evenings binge watching different television series, one after the other. The Crown, Secrets of Great British Castles, The Good Place, which we've gone all the way through twice, various science fiction series, some of which were frustratingly canceled after only one season, horribly annoying. Our current binge watch of choice is Amazing Hotels, produced by the BBC. One episode features a hotel in Oman, built overlooking a vast valley. The view is, as you would expect, considering how much we will never ever pay for a night in that hotel, stunning. Until, of course, you look down, at which point the bottom drops out of your stomach. It is our first Sunday virtually together here at Emmanuel in 2022. We stand overlooking the wide open vista of the new year. How we greet this new year depends in large measure on our perspective. Like the hosts of Amazing Hotels in the Amani Hotel, looking out from the balcony, what you see depends a great deal on where you're looking. Are you looking out at the spectacular sights of the valley, or are you looking down? Is it a spectacular view that takes your breath away, or a terrible chasm that also takes your breath away for a very different reason? It's probably a mixture of both. 2 years now into this global pandemic, we are in a time of great turning and churning. As the months and the new variants drag on, fault lines are being revealed more and more in the foundations which underlie our communities. We all know the increased costs at the grocery store and the gas station. We see the inflation, the stagflation, and even the shrinkflation that have become part of our vocabulary again. Really, shrinkflation is a thing. You probably know someone whose surgery or medical treatment has been canceled or postponed over the last week as our medical system creaks under the strain of the latest wave, coming after the one which preceded it and the ones that preceded them. It has been unrelenting. 2021 brought weather patterns and systems that buffeted communities across Canada. I could go on, but that's probably unsettling enough for all of us to take the happy out of Happy New Year. There is a question before us as we stand on the lookout, setting our sights on the year that begins. Who shall we be in this moment? As this community gathered as God's people, what shall guide us into an uncertain new year? What kind of people shall we be? Israel faced a similar moment in exile. In the reading this morning from Isaiah, Israel is still an exiled community, living far from home, but on the cusp of return. The possibility and promise of return was proclaimed to them. But return to what must have echoed in their hearts. There is that question, the same question that's before us. What lies before us? What lay before them? Return to a shattered city, a shattered temple, a shattered nation surrounded by hostile nations, ready to pounce at the slightest moment like the cat sitting at your feet under the covers. Could it be a new temple, the promised land, a place to be God's holy people, abundant in faith and hope, a light to the nations? The truth of it for Israel is that it wasn't an either-or. It wasn't a binary thing, 1 or 0, shattered city and shattered hope, or a people of the promise in the promised land. Just as it isn't a binary thing for us now, spectacular open vista of the new year, or a terrifying precipice over the cliff face. So, fun fact, in the world of computing, binary systems are not the only options that exist. There have, in fact, been other ways of making computing systems. There have been ternary, trinary systems as well. Not a lot of them, but they have, in fact, existed. So if you're bored or intrigued or both this afternoon, you could spend some time in Wikipedia reading up on ternary computer systems. My point is not to discuss their merits over binary systems. It is really important that one know one's sphere of competence. I think we all know where my sphere of competence is not. My point is only that there are, in fact, other options out there than either and or. Our reading from Isaiah, in fact, points us in this direction. Our passage from Isaiah is a reminder that Israel's return to Jerusalem, yes, will not be without challenges and strains. It's quite open about that. What matters, though, to Isaiah and to us is what God will do in the face of those challenges. When you pass through the waters, Isaiah proclaims, I will be with you. And through the rivers, God says, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. Do not be afraid. Do not fear, for I am with you. God does not say there will be no waters. Rather, when you walk through the waters, God says, I will be with you. Do not fear. God does not say there will be no river. Rather, God says the river shall not overwhelm you. God does not say there will not be flame and fire. Rather, God says the flame shall not consume you. Israel will, in fact, face water and fire in their return to the promised land. It's never claimed that walking through the waters and facing the fire will be a pleasant experience. Israel knows this. God knows this, and we know it too. What is promised is that Israel will not be overwhelmed. What is promised is that Israel will not be consumed, that Israel will not be abandoned in her time of trial. It's not a binary thing, fire or no fire, water or no water, flame or no flame. Instead, Isaiah speaks a promise to an exiled community about to enter into a new time, a time of return and restoration to the promised land. A word of promise about how they can live and thrive into an uncertain future that they can't yet see clearly, in which peril and possibility are joined together at the hip, but through it all, that God will be with them, and that they will endure as God's people, and that they need not be afraid. This was their certainty in an uncertain time, that they could be certain that the God who would lead them out of exile and back to Israel was the same God who had led them out of slavery in Egypt into the promised land, and the same God who would abide with them in the years that lie ahead. The unyielding, the unfailing, the uncompromising promise that God made to them in generations past, God made to them now, to give them strength to live a both-and kind of faith, allowing them to acknowledge that, yes, the flame would be there, the waters would be there, but God would be there too. and that the fire and the flame and the waters would not overcome them. As this community of God's people in this place, we live out our faith in worship, in acts of justice, in service of others. We do this in response to who we believe to God to be, a God who has claimed us, a God who has named us, who has redeemed us, who saves us, and who has utterly refused to let us go, and who dwells in the very midst of us, always. We can acknowledge and live into the reality of an uncertain future as we trust that God will be ever with us, without fail, without question, without end. We need not deny the very real challenges that lie before us at the cusp of this new year. A next wave, gas prices, food insecurity, mending our relationships with indigenous peoples, mending our relationship with creation. Fires and floods are real and they will come. Yet our future is not promise or peril. Instead, it is a promise that God will be with us always, that God will gather us together, that God will uphold us, and that God will journey with us into a new dawn, that we might tell others that this great story of hope and promise is for everyone, that God's love abides, that God is ever with us. Praise be to God. Amen.